Welcome to KnotWork Myth and Storytelling. This is the show where ancestral wisdom meets the modern imagination. I'm your host and lead storyteller, Marisa Gowdy. I'm a myth worker, a story healer, and a writing coach. I'm the author of The Sovereignty Knot, A Woman's Way to Freedom, Power, Love, and Magic, and the founder of the Writer's Knot and Author's Knot communities. On KnotWork, we explore the mythology and folklore of Ireland and beyond. Whether you're drawn to Celtic culture and the power of the landscape, or whether you just like a good story and expansive conversation, you're in the right place. Falcha. If you love what you hear and want to support the show, I'd be so grateful if you become a paid subscriber to my Myth is Medicine newsletter over on Substack. Look for the link at the top of the show notes or visit mythismedicine.substack.com. Season 6, Episode 31. Digging even deeper than mythology can take us. Before we dive into this week's episode, I want to offer one last invitation. Here we are at the beginning of September 2025. And there's just a little bit of time left to join us in the Writer's Knot. This is our global creative community. It's the place where the mythic imagination meets creative expression. It's the place where writers from around the world gather together to meet themselves on the page and meet one another in what truly is a shared heart space, head space, and soul space. This time around, we'll be focusing on the power of the landscape, both the imaginal, mythic landscape, as well as the very real land and elements that surround us each day. Seats are limited, but there's still a few left. If you're feeling called to write with us this season, please visit marisagowdy.com or find the link in the show notes to join us in the Writer's Knot. I hope to see you there. This episode is a bit of a departure in that I'm going to be sharing with you a poem rather than a story. And it's not my poem. It is one of the great poems of Ireland of the 20th century. And I want to share with you a bit of the personal reasons why it resonates so much. And I also want to explore the mythic reasons about why it resonates. But here's a spoiler. This poem doesn't mention a single mythological being. And in that, I think we'll find its greatest strength and its greatest source of wisdom. When I first started reading poetry, and specifically really studying Irish poetry, I would essentially skip around the books looking for bits of mythological magic. Whether that was Nuala Gonal or Paula Meehan or Seamus Heaney or any number of other writers, I was looking for the sparkly stuff. I was on a quest for the other world. And in that quest, I certainly found a great deal of magic. But I also think I missed out on not only insights from our very real, very mundane world, but also I missed out on all the ways that those works of art that seemed to be just about the earth, just about the sky, just about the old woman on her way to the shop, those were actually revealing so much more about the nature of all the worlds, both this one and that one. Recently, there have been a lot of changes in my life, but also a lot of changes in the way that I work, the way that I look at my work. And they've been subtle, so subtle that I think I'm only beginning to make all the connections now. You may have recently noticed that I changed the name of my Substack, or rather expanded it. It's long been Myth is Medicine, but recently I've added the additional phrase, words are magic. Myth is medicine, words are magic. That is really the fullness of what I know is mine to do. And I think that the poem I'm going to share with you really offers us the fullness of what that means in action. Because words, even when they are crafted around something that may seem very everyday and very mundane, when they are crafted with intention and purpose and with some source in something greater than I just got to get this done, or I've got to feed the content beast, or what does my audience need to hear from me? When we source our words in something deeper, the magic flows through. And if we are mythically minded, I think that we are offering access to a mythical other world, even if we're talking about digging in our own gardens or what our fathers and grandfathers used to do. So there's a hint right there in the poem that I'm going to share with you. As I said at the start, it's one of the great poems of Ireland of the 20th century. And it's a wonderful place to begin because it is the very first poem in the very first collection by Nobel laureate Seamus Heaney. And I share with you this poem because it resonates so deeply, and also because it is the one that I shared with my daughter today on what is our very first day of homeschooling. We've decided that on the 3 days a week when she's home with me, the other couple of days she's over at a homeschooling collective working on art and out in nature, we're going to be working on a poem together every morning. And this was the one that I offered to her today. And it felt more than right to offer it to you now. I'm going to share with you the opening and closing stanzas of the poem. I encourage you to listen to the man himself read his masterpiece. A quick Google search will yield several videos, and I will link to them in the show notes as well. For now, it might be enough to say that this poem, Digging, is about honoring the family tradition, even as you step away from it. The poet does not work the land as his father and grandfather did before him. Instead, he looks to their labors, and he considers his own. I love this poem because he treats both paths with dignity and honor, offering grace to the writer as well as to the farmer. But enough intro. I invite you, as I said, to listen to the whole of Seamus Heaney's Digging. But here I offer you just a couple of verses. Between my finger and my thumb, the squat pen rests, snug as a gun. Under my window, a clean, rasping sound when the spade sinks into gravelly ground. My father, digging. Poem goes on, but I'll offer you the last two stanzas. The cold smell of potato mold, the squelch and slap of soggy peat, the curt cuts of an edge through living roots awaken in my head. But I've no spade to follow men like them. Between my finger and my thumb, the squat pen rests. I'll dig with it. The part of me that is a coach rather than a teacher wants to simply leave those words there and encourage you to go and find the poem yourself and walk around with it for a while, to keep it tucked into the pocket of your soul and to think about it next time you find yourself digging in a garden or watching someone else digging in theirs. But as I seem to have accidentally fallen into the teacher role, I'm going to give you a few of my thoughts, and hopefully they will open you up to your own. Because it may have been a long time, or never, since you sat in a classroom and were asked to really think about poetry, to really embody a piece of verse and let it roll through you, reminding you of cellular memories you never knew you had, reminding you of bits of childhood that had once seemed out of reach. Because, of course, we all come from diggers of one kind or another. Seamus Heaney was born in 1939 in County Derry, in what is the north of Ireland. And he would have known well exactly the scenes as he has described them, of course. He came from a long line of farmers. But many of us may not know the branches of our family who lived off the land. But at some point, all of them would have had to. Whether the ancestors were from Ireland or from any other place on the earth, whether you are still living on the lands where you know your family has been for generations and generations back beyond counting, or whether you know that yours is a story of immigration and movement, either by choice or by force, at some point they had their hands in the earth. And now, just about all of us, whether we are professional writers who fit that pen into our hands in order to make a livelihood, or whether we pick up a pen for pleasure and for exploration, and because we know that writing is in our very bones and must be expressed somehow, we are all now the poet, looking back to a time when life and the earth were so firmly intertwined. I'm speaking in generalities, of course, and I hope that there are farmers listening to this today. And I want to say thank you for living lives so entwined with the earth that you make it possible for all of us to survive and even thrive. And it's interesting. At the top of this episode, I was talking a bit about this world and that world, and the way that I was always seeking the other world in poetry. But we're always creating this world and that world dichotomies in our heads. Heaney is a poet. His father and grandfathers before him were farmers. There is, in fact, a difference between the two, but oh my goodness, there is a continuity. There is the way in which we are all always digging. We are excavating the soil or the soul or the story. And when we can stay connected in that way to that very fertile stuff from which everything grows, then, well, everything becomes possible. This poem takes us into the squelch and slap of soggy peat, into words that feel so deeply visceral, even if we've never found ourselves tromping across a bog. And in that viscerality, in the kind of writing that makes us feel embodied, both by receiving a poem, but also by finding the courage to write a poem, that's where we find truest connection. It takes bravery to reach across the divide, especially if we might consider ourselves more of grocery buyers than agricultural growers. It takes courage to go back to the soil itself, to the essence of the landscape, and ask, can I build a relationship with you? Can I translate my knowing of the land beneath my feet, the trees that grow in the forest, the river that runs nearby? Can I get to know you well enough that I can translate you into words? Can I trust that you will whisper your stories and secrets to me? Can I find the courage to put that which is ineffable into words upon a blank page? Well, I have no idea if that's what Mr. Heaney's experience was, but I know it's mine. I grew up in a gorgeous part of the world. I grew up on Cape Cod, Massachusetts, where the beaches were our playground when we weren't tied up with the everyday stuff of life, of course. But I didn't have that sort of ancestral connection to the land, and I certainly didn't grow up farming. And so it's been for me a lifelong return to what would have been so natural for our ancestors. That sense of being in relationship with the earth herself, to speaking with the trees and potentially even speaking for the trees. But of course, we have something that our ancestors did not, and that is written language. Because it's been something that's occurred to me lately, which is sort of one of those like obvious epiphanies. But universal literacy is only a few hundred years old. And the work that we do, particularly as women writers, it was revolutionary not many decades ago, really, when you think of it in the long, great sweep of history. So, again, the magical and the mystical, they're always close at hand. And you don't necessarily have to go back to the oldest of the myths to see gods with chariots pulled by horses made of the waves, or to saints who could hang their cloaks upon a sunbeam. We find in the most surprising circumstances, such as our ability to write our ideas on paper, to share them with one another, to feel a poem come across time and speak to our souls, even though we ourselves may know nothing about the ground that is being described therein. Yeah, I'm coming back to the poetry that made me as I share it with my daughter in what is becoming, I think, a strange and wonderful thing. I'm not sure how many 11-year-olds in America read Heaney. And though this change for us is pretty astronomical, and I'm not sure what it's going to do to things like my ability to produce a podcast on the regular, I know that there's something deeply powerful in this change. And I'm grateful to have this opportunity to share it with you. I'm grateful for this opportunity to share a poem that hopefully will help shift something about the way you see your day, your life, your desire and ability to dig deep into the earth and into the meaning of this beautiful life that you get to have, that we get to share. Once more, I want to remind you that the Writer's Knot is open for registration through September 10th. Our group on Friday afternoons at 3 o'clock Eastern has lots of seats available, and I would love to have you there with us. I hope that you find a way to put a pen in your hand today. And whether that's to write something just a little bit more special than a grocery list, or whether you're going to be doing your own myth work and exploring the adventures and the secrets of a mythic character, I wish you well on that journey. And if you'd like companions, please consider joining us in the Writer's Knot. Talk soon. Thank you for tuning in to KnotWork Myth and Storytelling. Please subscribe and review the show on your favorite podcast platform, and do share this episode with other lovers of mythology and story. By the way, everyone is a lover of mythology and story, even if they've forgotten. Creating this show is a labor of love, and your support will help me continue to craft and share stories throughout this season and beyond. Please consider becoming a paid subscriber to my newsletter, Myth is Medicine, over on Substack, where you'll find new writing and conversations each week. You can find out more about my writing, my book, our online writing communities, as well as how to work with me as a writing coach at marisagowdy.com. Gratefully, I live, write, work, and record this podcast on the ancestral lands of the Munsee Lenape tribe, whose name means original people. Music on this show is performed by Beth Sweeney and Billy Hardy.